with that being said, Clinton, can you get the chalkboard out, please? All right. With that being said, someone didn't turn on the thing. I guess that would be me. Can you imagine that? So we're in this section where Jesus is performing these miracles, and we're seeing a series of them. And they started with the Gerasene demonic, and we looked at that last week. That was in Mark chapter 5. And then he's approached by this official who said his daughter is sick. So Jesus is going to go honor his request. But on the way, we see that a woman who has been dealing with lifelong medical issues touches Jesus. And during that interruption, the time that it takes to deal with that, we find that when he arrives at the official's house, the other daughter's died. The daughter has died. So all these incidences deal with a matter of faith. And that's really what we're concentrating on, because we're going to have some people that accept Christ in faith, and then we'll see in chapter 6, we'll see the opposite. There will be those that reject him. And that's going to be the norm. Some are going to accept Christ, and then actually most will reject them. And so when we looked at it, chapter 5, there's the Gerasene demonic, and then Jairus' daughter. That's where we're going to pick up today. But when we look at faith, it's just a quick review. Remember, there's 3 aspects of faith. And what were they? You recall? The first aspect is what? Okay, this mental assent, or just acknowledging the facts that they're true. And again, most of the U.S. population will acknowledge there's a God, and a large percentage of those will acknowledge Jesus is his son. But it doesn't make any difference in their life, because what it has to come with a saving faith. And remember, there's only one Greek word for all these words: belief, faith, or trust. There's this aspect that now that I believe you're the Son of God, and that you're in charge of everything, and you're King of Kings, I guess I can trust you. And I choose to trust you. And it's a transition from just head knowledge to a willingness to follow him and be his disciple. Now, that's always followed up by action. Because if you don't act on what you believe to be true because you trust it, you really don't trust it, right? And we use that little picture of someone, a little child's, the house is burning, he's in the second story window, and what does the dad say? Jump. And the kid says what? No, because I'm scared. And what does the father say? Trust me. Right? Now, when do you know the child trusting? Well, either it gets too hot, so he says, I might as well end it, or else he just says, I'll trust, I believe that my father's going to catch me. It's trust. And that's what Jesus is looking for him. One's intellectual, one's more emotional. It doesn't always make sense, but it does make all the sense. It's more spiritual. Then one is a matter of the will. I choose to do this because in whom I trust. And so the Gerasene demonic, when we look at him, we see that Jesus cast this legion of demons into the swine. And so the question is, what kind of faith did this demonic person, this young man have?
He knew God could do what he had.
Okay, how do you know that?
He probably heard about him already.
Well, look, remember the text. What happened? When Jesus gets off the boat, what immediately happens? He falls before him, and who speaks to Jesus? The demon. Does the demon have faith in who Jesus is? He says, I adjure you, the Son of God. What do you got to do with us? Don't torment us. He knows. So what faith does the man have? Or at least it's indicated in the text. None. There's none at all. That's what I want you to see. There's none. And we can see that Jesus has authority over Satan in this example here. Now, he asks then afterwards, he begs to go with Jesus. Do you remember that? That's where we left off. He begs because something's changed in his life. Because remember, he had a deplorable life, and now he's healed in his right mind. And Jesus says, no, You go into the cities and you tell the great things God has done for you. And it says he went away and he did that. He proclaimed in all the Decapolis, the 10 cities that were in that area. So now I've been asked the question, what kind of faith does he have? Does he have mental assent in who Jesus is? Oh yeah, he's experienced it firsthand. Does he trust him? And now is he going to act on it? Yes. See, now from little or no faith, or it's not indicated at all, to a complete saving faith. You see the difference? Now, with that being said, that takes us now to where we left off, Jairus and his daughter. So we're in Mark chapter 5, and we're down in verse, gotta make sure I'm in the right place. And Jesus, 21, because they asked him to leave, so he left. He goes the other side of the lake. And verse 22, one of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up and upon seeing him fell at his feet and entreated him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her that she may get well and live. And he, that be Jesus, went off with him, and a great multitude was following him and pressed in on him. And so here this man, who is a religious leader, a male, comes to Jesus and, falls before him and showing that, really worship. It's an act of worship. When he falls at his feet, right? And begs of him earnestly, it says, please, please. Now, we made the contrast with the official that came, the ruler that came to Jesus in John 3 by night. Remember that? And why did he come by night? Because there's going to be some public censure by his colleagues that if he is known or perceived as a disciple of Christ. But he is. He's a believer. He has mental assent. He says, we know that no one has to be of God to do these things. And that's when Jesus starts challenging him. But this man is public about it. He doesn't care what people think, right? And we suggested last week as we left off that when you're desperate, it doesn't matter what other people think. Because who's about to die? His daughter. And so he has this mental awareness that Jesus can heal. Maybe he's witnessed it, or he's heard the stories, or talked to people that has been healed. Now, has it moved from his head to his heart? How do you see that? Is there emotional reaction and action that comes from it? Yeah. I mean, if we don't do this today to our superiors, we don't do it to anyone. But if someone came and fell at, someone's feet, would you go, wow, what's going on here? That's really humbling, isn't it? When you prostrate yourself before another, like there's something going on here, and you'd be very curious what's going on, right? And we would say, get up, man. What's wrong with you? No, you've got to help me. I'm begging you. If someone did that, could you ever say no? If they're down on their feet, kneeling before you, please, please. Yes, Gary.
My Bible says he prayed, not
Okay, and that's the idea of petitioning him, praying him. It's face to face, but yes, that's what he's doing.
Peter hadn't fallen at his feet. He told him to get up, and he's just a man.
That's right. But Jesus accepted this worship. Now, on their way, I have to notice, while he's following this crowd, he goes off, this crowd follows him, and it says they're pressing in on him. What does that mean? All right, so you've been in a situation that especially like if you're trying to get into a sporting event or Black Friday sale when they open the doors. Everyone's at the door and they're trying to what? Get in first, and all of a sudden all politeness and etiquette goes out the window. You're pushing people away like me, let me in first. Right? You've been there. I've seen you do that. No. All right, so Jesus is so popular in his ministry, when he gets up to go up somewhere else, this great crowd is following him. They're pushing to get up close. Are they touching him physically? Yes, that's what this word is implying here. There's contact. There's a difference between pressing against Jesus and touching Jesus, and that's what we're going to see. All right? So where's he going? To heal the daughter. Now there's going to be an interruption, okay? And that's where we read about this unclean woman, because you have to understand this woman has a blood hemorrhage, all right? And from the old law that made her unclean, and because of that, you were not supposed to touch someone else. You understand that? Until you become purified of your uncleanliness, and she's not going to get purified unless she first gets what? Healed. That's right. Because as long as she continues to have this medical issue, she will continue to be unclean. And so we'll read about her. And so look in verse 25. And we're going to see the contrast between her and Jairus. A woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years and endured much the hands of many physicians. That's interesting. Did they help her? Actually, it's suggested that she endured much. Perhaps it made things worse. Has that ever happened going? No, we're not even going to go there. Have you ever gone to the doctor and it turned out, yeah. So, but she has spent, it says, her life savings. And she spent all she had and was not helped at all. But rather, it's just gotten worse. So 12 years, she's done everything the medical professionals have said. She spent all her money, and she just continues to deteriorate. All right? She's unclean. You know, I'm talking about ceremonially in the Jewish law. And yet she's in this crowd, and she does this amazing thing. Okay? Let's read about it. And after hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his cloak. And so they have the inner garment, then they have an outer garment called the coat, but it would be like we'd think of a robe. And she just touches the fringe of it or the bottom of it. For she's thinking, verse 28, if I just touch his garments, I shall get well. Now, who told her that would happen?
No one.
Nobody, all right? Now, does she have faith here?
Oh, yeah.
But it's, how do I say this? It's not a completely healthy or correct faith, because there's something superstitious about this. Is there something about touching Jesus' clothes that will make you well? No, what's going to make you well? Jesus. It's not what he's wearing. It's not somehow touching him. But it kind of appeals to the superstition of the day. You do this. She's probably tried all the remedies. None of them work. But in her own mind, she's come up with this idea, if I just touch him. And so, is it actually correct? But that really doesn't matter. The fact is she has faith in Jesus. Yes.
I'm not so sure she had faith or trusted that his clothes would, but just because they were his clothes, that his power would permeate. I think it was still her trust in his power, not her trust in his clothes.
Well, yes, and I understand that. But today we have people that if you can come in contact with a sliver of the cross, it's going to bless your life. It's so superstitious. You know, you have a holy water that's been blessed by someone. If you have it in your life, you're going to be blessed. Or a ribbon that's been anointed by someone who is called of God. There's so much superstition religiously today in the name of Christ, and it's not about his clothing. It's not about the shroud of Turin, it's not about the cross. It's about who? Jesus. And so you can't fault her entirely, so I'm not trying to, but it's a little skewed, right? Have we been there ourselves? As long as we have faith in Christ, and we're going to grow in our faith, it's to become more and more pure as it goes along. Yes?
I guess I can understand some of what people do today based on these accounts from the New Testament. Because wasn't it after the first gospel sermon at Pentecost that some people waited just so that maybe shadow of Peter and
Right.
the apostles would cross over them?
Yeah, and later they were taking handkerchiefs from Paul and just laying them on people and they're being healed. So, yes.
I can understand where some of that superstition comes from.
Yes.
In this place.
Yes.
What I see with her is an act of desperation, number one. 12 years with this flow of blood, lost everything that she has, and she's still unclean.
Yeah.
So I see desperation, but I also see hope and I see faith.
Well, obviously there's faith, yes. Or else he wouldn't be doing any of this. That's right. She had heard about Jesus, and now she's acting on him. All right, so Keller writes, only when we begin to see that nothing in the world finally satisfies can we come to Christ with anything but the right attitude. It's interesting. Jesus isn't asking you to come to him as an option. In other words, the doctor hasn't helped. You know, the remedies have been suggested hasn't helped. And I'll just try Jesus as another option. No. He's asking for a total change in your life. Those don't work. They won't offer. I'm talking about offering happiness and peace in life. You got to come to Christ not as an option, but as a total alternative. No longer them, but him. Do you see that? And that's what's happening here. Because it makes no medical sense that you touch someone's garment and you get healed. Okay? But life is difficult. Granted, is that true? But nothing's too difficult for God. Nothing. And sometimes we can give in to our difficulties without taking the proper action to remedy them. And that's not finding in the world. We're only going to find the remedy who? In Christ. All right? Is that fair? Go ahead.
Some of what could have fed this idea in their head too is when you look at the pool of Siloam, and the angel would come down and stir the water, and then if you were the first one to step in, you were healed.
Yeah.
And so there could be some of that that's going around too. And in her mind, if I just touch
Yeah.
his garment,
Right.
I'm just saying, I'm trying to get it all together.
Well, I know. It could have been. Now, what's important is we see the word again immediately, right? Immediately, the flow of her blood was dried up. I don't know if she felt it, but I know it didn't take hours, and it didn't take days. It's not like take this pill, and after 10 days, when you take all of them, you'll be okay. No, immediately. And she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Now, that's what she's experiencing. Now, notice what Jesus is experiencing. Immediately. See the contrast? Immediately she feels and recognizes she's healed. And immediately Jesus goes, someone touched me. Because he felt the power go out from him. Now that's very interesting. And he goes, who touched my garments? Now, the disciples, like we would have, they're very practical. And they say it, Lord, what do you mean, who touched you? Look, everyone's bumping up against you. Everyone's touching you. What are you talking about? Who touched me? Sorry for this black thing. But he looked around to see the woman who had done this, and she was, I don't even know what it says now. We have to look in our Bibles. Verse 32. And he looked around to see the woman who had done this, but the woman, fearing and trembling, verse 33, aware of what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Same posture, right? Worship, fell down before him. She's been discovered, and she tells him the whole story. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. Now, let's just talk about this real quickly. Then, does she have faith, first of all? Yeah, mental assent, trust, and does she have action? Yeah. Is it a perfect, complete faith and understand everything correctly? That's not the matter. That isn't what is important. As long as she has faith, she's going to grow in him, and it's going to take care of itself. This idea of power going out from Jesus, what does that mean? Did he lose power? Like a power surge, like, drained?
Some flow of divine power went into this woman.
He recognized, yes, that's it, that the power that he has through the Holy Spirit, that some of it left him and did something. It doesn't mean he was became weak or power left him. He just know that power went out from him and it did something. Now, do you think he had to ask, who touched me?
No.
All right. But he's calling her out because he's going to take time on his way to heal Jairus' daughter to deal with this woman to explain to everybody else. Now, it's interesting. Jairus was a religious male official. He stops a procession and deals with an unclean woman on the way. Do you see his compassion? It doesn't matter about your status in the world, perceived by the world. Jesus views you all the same. Didn't he? And she was unclean when she touched him. But he doesn't admonish her for that. He says, your faith made you well. Do you see that? And so he's calling her out to draw attention to what she did so other people would listen and learn. And I want you to see that. So she tells the whole story and said, you know, I was unclean. She tells everything what we repeated. And what does he say? Your faith has made you well. Go in peace.
When you look at the act that took place, all these other men that were bumping into women, whatever, bumping into him, no power went from him. But her act of faith and her
That's right.
heart and touching him, that's the compassion. Jesus knew that this was taking
That's
place.
right. Now, Augustine, long time ago, said, flesh presses, but faith touches. A lot of people get close to Jesus, close to him, but they never touch Jesus. I mean, they don't have a relationship with him. There's a difference between being close and having a relationship of faith. And that's what we see here. Okay, any other thoughts or comments? All right. Jesus has authority over disease, doesn't he? Well, that only makes sense, wouldn't it? We already saw that he has authority over the winds and the seas. And when they asked him, do you care? Yeah, he cares. But when Jesus is in the boat, you don't have anything to worry about. This woman is desperate. And does Jesus care again for a woman who's unclean? Yes. And he's willing to serve her and heal her over her disease. All right. So now back to Jairus, the prominent person who's humbled himself before Jesus. Okay? Verse 35, while he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official saying, your daughter's died. Why trouble the teacher anymore? So her disease or whatever was problem, her illness took her life. And so they sent a messenger and said, it doesn't matter anymore. You don't need to come. Is that reasonable? Well, yeah, she's dead. What can he do now? But why did Jairus go in the first place? To have her healed. So does he have faith? But now it doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do. So does he have faith?
He doesn't have that higher level of faith.
He doesn't have faith he doesn't have a total understanding that what Jesus can do.
He can heal her, but he can't bring her back to life.
That's exactly. He can heal her, but can't bring her back to life. Now, again, it's an incomplete faith. You're shaking your head.
It's not saying that the one who, Jairus, is the one who says, don't come.
All right, well,
His official that says,
I'll give you that. Let's read ahead.
so the official, he may not even have had faith that he was going to heal her in the first place. And he certainly doesn't have faith that he's going to bring her back from the dead.
All right, well, let's read it ahead. Jesus overhearing what was being spoken said to the synagogue official. Who's that?
The one who gave
Jairus, right?
No.
He was speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official. All right? Don't be afraid any longer. Only what? He says, just believe. Well, I did believe. That's why I sent for you in the first place. But now it's too late. That's what's implied here. He says, don't worry, believe. No, wait a second. He does believe. What's he talking about here now? Have mental assent? What's he saying? Trust. That's what he's saying. Trust. It's the same Greek word, believe, but he's actually saying, just trust me. Trust me. Yeah, you got problems, but nothing's too difficult for me. JC.
I'm wondering also what kind of frame of mind is the synagogue official in that, like you just pointed out, if you stop and heal a woman that was unclean and shouldn't have been there in the first place, stopping from saving my daughter.
Yeah?
What kind of frame of mind is he in? If you'd have kept going, maybe my daughter would be dead.
You know, it's not stated, but it's fair to question that. Wonder what's going on in his head. Right. Okay? So, So he goes ahead, he allowed no one to come to him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. So again, he's asking for trust. Now I think I'm going to suggest that's most of where we're at. We have mental assent. We acknowledge who Jesus is. Yeah, he can heal people. Yes, he calmed the seas. Yes, he can raise the dead. But I don't know if he can do it in my life. Right? I'm not sure he'll do it for me because I'm not sure he cares for me. Well, he might have did it for the unclean woman, but, I'm different. My life's just tough. Well, it's not about ourselves. It's about the one we believe in, Jesus, isn't it? Trust says, I believe that he cares for me unconditionally. Trust says he's faithful. When he says he will be there for me, I trust that he will. Trust says he can do all things in my life, even when I can't understand how. Trust says things will be better. Is that right? He's saying, don't be afraid anymore. Just believe. So, look what happens. They came to the house of an official. There's this commotion. What are they doing? Weeping and wailing. Is that appropriate? There had been a loss of a family member. You can imagine the turmoil inside, because many of us have experienced the loss of a loved one, a family member perhaps, but it's heart-wrenching. It just rips your heart out. And he enters in and he said to them, Jesus, why such commotion? Why are you wailing? Does that question seem appropriate just for someone walking in the room? No, it doesn't. It's disrespectful, isn't it? It appears that, rude. Like, what are you crying about? Like, really? You don't get it? This is why we're crying. We were hoping you'd get here in time, but you didn't make it. She's dead. But Jesus comes from a different plane, a different perspective, because he knows what he's going to do. And from that perspective, he realizes, no, in a little bit, your wailing is going to turn into joy. Your tears into just exultation. Because I know what I'm going to do. You don't have a clue. So here's the next statement. He said, the child's not dead, but just asleep. Now, this is such a startling statement. It says they started laughing at him. The healer that they have sent for to heal, now they're laughing at him. All right? And you can understand why. Do we have any other accounts where Jesus refers to death as sleep? Lazarus said Lazarus is asleep. And he said, well, hey, you'll wake up. He said, no, Lazarus is dead. But from God's point of view, death is different than when we see it. We see it the termination of all life. It's just you cease to exist. We say, well, no, that's not true. The soul exists. But that's the way we emotionally react to it. It's interesting. The word cemetery is that comes from the Greek word, which means a place of sleeping. That's literally what it means. You put bodies in the grave because they're what? Sleeping. Because they believe their spirits still live and God's going to come and raise up their bodies and in a spiritual body, and there's going to be this reunion. It's a place of sleeping. So Jesus said, he's not dead, he's just asleep. Is he right? Yes.
Some cultures had the practice because some comas or sleeps were so convincing to death. When they buried somebody, oftentimes they post someone outside the grave for 24 hours or at least a day in case they really were just sleeping and you hear some scratching or commotion, they'll let them out.
There you go. That would be something. Huh?
So that's where they put the bell.
Yeah. Yeah.
You hear it ringing, it's a dead ringer.
It's a dead ringer. That's true. That's where it comes from. All right. He puts them all out. He takes the child's father and mother and his own companions. That'd be who? Who did he take with him? Peter, James, and John, right? And he entered the room where the child was. He's not going to make this big show. It's not a big trickster. It's not a circus act. This is very serious, and he's sensitive to their emotions, obviously. He goes into the room where the child was. And here it says, why is that black there again? Literally taking the child by the hand, he said, Talith Talitha come, which translated means literally Tabitha, or little girl, get up. And immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old, and immediately they were completely astounded. So two immediatelys. First thing happens what? Immediately, the dead gets up. Was she asleep? She was dead. She was physically dead. But God somehow instilled the spirit back in her, and she gets up. Is she like unstable or? No, she's totally well. And immediately, what happens with the people? From laughing and wailing to astonished. You would be too, right? The word Tabitha means, it's a nickname, and it means little girl, but it's like you would say to your daughter, honey, or sugar, or sweetie. It's a term of endearment. It's not, that's what he's saying. And he's not calling her by her name. He's saying, little girl. And it shows his compassion for her. And recognize, here's this young little girl, and he calls her by that, and he says, rise. And she listens and obeys. Yes?
James says damsel.
Damsel. Yeah, it just means literally little girl. And it's a sweet term of endearment. Yes?
It's a tradition among the Hispanic families that the mothers will call their daughters Yika, which is my little girl.
My little girl. Yeah. All right. So he tells, don't tell anyone about this. He'll, why? This is not the first time he's done that. And we speculate why, because he didn't tell us why. Other times he said, my time's not at hand. But let me just throw this out. Does he want Jesus going to all the grave sites? I mean, does he want himself going to all the grave sites? Can you imagine if this got out? Jesus can raise the dead. Come, raise my... it'd be hugely problematic, right? People have been dead for weeks or months and whatever. But, and he said, give her something to eat. Now, that's interesting. That's a detail that's not necessary for this whole story. Why is it included there in Mark's account?
Because it shows she's healthy and healed.
She's alive and she's hungry. Give her something to eat. Because when you're sick, what do you not do usually? And we got to get her sustenance back. And again, it just acknowledges this historical count. It wasn't just some myth that was made up. All right?
He asked for food when he reappeared to them afterward.
Yeah, that's right.
He was human, he's not a ghost.
That's right.
Was she?
Yeah. If you didn't hear what she said, that when Jesus rose from the dead and he met his disciples, he said, you got anything to eat? And again, he was hungry, and because he was actually raised in the flesh. It wasn't some mystical person. It's actually him in the flesh. This is amazing what happens. Now, when Jesus comes again, will all our bodies be raised? If you're alive at that time, there will be no resurrection in your body. But if you die, and everyone that's died in Christ, and their body is in the grave, turned to dust, consumed by fire, if it's cremation, doesn't matter. He has the power to put it all back together. And it says, 1 Corinthians 15, that's Corinthian study coming up in 2 weeks, that all of them will come out of the ground, a spiritual body, sown a physical body, but raised a spiritual. And then your spirit, the real you, will be reunited with this new body and will live forever. So this is just a preview of what's to come. What's interesting, this girl's going to die twice. She died right here, and then later in life, because of old age, disease, an accident, who knows, she's going to die again. Right? But it's been appointed for everyone to die at least once. Yes?
On timeline, is this the first time that he raised someone from the dead?
Yeah, this is before Lazarus. This is before the widow's son. Yes, I would guess it is.
So when he said he was scripture and no one should know about it, I guess he knows in his own heart that people would do that, they would talk about it.
Right. Well, they're going to anyway. How could you keep this quiet? Everyone would be talking about it. Does Jesus have authority over death? Yes. So what do we have to worry about? If we're in Christ and have this kind of faith that saves, doesn't have to be a perfect, complete faith, just one that trusts him enough to follow him. We don't have nothing to worry about. He said, don't be afraid. Just trust. All right. So that's chapter 5. We have time just to introduce and start chapter 6. What time is it? All right. So we have 7 minutes. Is that right? All right. We're going to see him go back to his hometown, and then the 12 are sent out. That's probably all the farther we'll get, if we can get that far. So let's look in chapter 6. Jesus returns home. Now, where was he raised? What town? Although he's born in Bethlehem, his hometown of his parents was Nazareth. So verse 1, he went out from there, and he came into his hometown, and disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue, and the many listeners were astonished, saying, where did this man get these things? And what is this wisdom given to him? And such miracles as those performed by his hands. Then the question comes up, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, and Jose or Joseph, and Judas and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Now, let me just back up. Jesus, until the age 30, lived extraordinary, typical life. It was ordinary. There was nothing special about him. There was nothing special about his looks. He had just a typical occupation in his day. He comes from an ordinary, Nazareth was not a town of renown at all. He lived just an obscure, ordinary life. And so did his brothers and sisters. Now at age 30, he comes back, and as the custom on Saturday, they'd have the assemblies in the synagogue, this day of rest, and the person that was chosen to teach would stand up, and usually they'd read something out of the Old Testament, then they expound on it. Now he's doing this because no doubt his reputation is preceding him. They're like, who is this Jesus of Nazareth? And we know. And it says they're what? Astonished. Do they have mental assent that something's going on with this guy? They're astonished at his teaching and his wisdom, how he expounds on things and his miracles. So they've got mental assent, but now we're going to move from a place where people accept him in faith to people to reject him. And that's the norm today. That people, it's not about the evidence. It's not about it being reasonable. It's an issue, a matter of the heart. They reject him because they can't get their arms around that this man that we knew for 30 years could be divine. But they acknowledge it. He said, is this not the son of Mary, the brother of James? We know this guy. We watch him run around and play with our kids. We know his brothers and sisters. So mentally, they can't get out of their head and let it move to their heart that he is who he said he was. So this prejudice dismisses and filters out the evidence. You see that? The evidence is there. They understand it. They even acknowledge it. But does it do any good in their life? So when people say, increase my faith, I need more faith, I'm going to suggest to you it's not a matter about evidence, always. It starts with that. Faith is an act of mental persuasion. That's where it always starts. But after that, it's no longer a matter of persuasion and facts and evidence. It's a matter of right here. Am I going to decide to trust him and follow him no matter what anyone else says or does? No matter how anyone lets me down or builds me up. It's all personal. And these people that should have been the first ones are the last. You see that? And so they took advantage. That's the word we get scandal from. Scandalizo is the Greek word. It's something they tripped over. And what did they trip over? We know this guy. They saw him and they have him defined in a box as Jesus of Mary, the son of Mary. Now, it doesn't mention Joseph because he's out of the picture. Maybe he's dead now. Maybe the rumor that she gave birth to a child illegitimately because, I'm sorry? The stigma's probably still stuck, but he's referred to the son of Mary, and Joseph's not mentioned at all. We don't know why. Yes?
Well, to me, it's interesting. It mentions James, Joseph, Judas, Simon. James and Judas are Jew for a long time. They weren't believing
Yeah.
either. But they came around at some point to be some of their brothers and our
Right.
Savior's strongest proponents.
Yeah, these guys tried to rescue him earlier, and they're not believers, exactly. All right, just a little side thing, we'll stop here. Not too long ago, they found an ossuary box. That's a bone box, and we put people in coffins, put them below ground. The Jews traditionally would put your bones in a body, and it would be above ground, or in a cave carved out of stone. Well, they uncovered one, and on the box was this inscription right there, and it says, James, the son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. So the big thing, is this the ossuary box or the bone box for James, who wrote the book of James, the brother of Jesus? And there's been a big dispute. At first it was thought to be a forgery. Now they're thinking maybe it's real. But that's not my point. It's very interesting. I'd like to go see it. But the point is, there are some that say Jesus never had any brothers or sisters. Right? It's the Catholic teaching, and it's called a de fide. In other words, an absolute faith, and to deny it is heresy. It's one of their essential beliefs that you have to accept. And basically it goes like this, that Mary was not just a virgin when Jesus was born, she was perpetually a virgin. She never had sexual relationships with anyone. Now it's interesting, it says in Matthew's account, Joseph kept her a virgin until, that implies what? Afterwards, he no longer kept her, all right, as a virgin. They had normal sexual relationship, and that's where these children came from. They also say Mary herself had a virgin birth. You know why they say that? Because sin, the false doctrine is taught, sin, you're born with it because it's passed on from Adam to his child, to his child, to his child, to you. Because you're all descendants of Adam. So if Mary's going to give birth to the pure Son of God without sin, she had to have a virgin birth herself. And that's what they teach and hold to. Now, you ask, where's the evidence for that, historically, scripturally, or anything else? And the answer is what? There's absolutely none whatsoever. And then you ask them, it says, well, what about this text where it says, don't we have his brothers and sisters for him, and they name them? He said, well, those were cousins and brethren in a generic sense, like we call each other brothers and sisters. Is that how it sounds to you right here? Isn't this the carpenter, the son of Mary? Does that sound like an actual child of Mary? And the brother of James? Are they not talking about family relationships and not generic, relationships? And so, well, that's all I need to say. It's without merit, and we just have to understand we get our faith from Scripture and not extracurricular or extra sources, because there aren't even any, all right? We're going to finish right there with Jesus. He's going to wonder at their unbelief. And there's two things that Jesus marveled at. He marveled at great faith, and here we're going to see that he marvels at no faith at all. It's like, what? After all I've said and done, you don't believe? He doesn't get it. He marvels at it. He's astonished at great faith and no faith at all. All right. Thank you very much. Clinton, thank you, even though I didn't get to it.